Well, I really hate that, and this is kind of where we can find some common ground. I hate this idea that if you eat animals, you hate animals.
Hey, what is up, guys? So I found a video from Steven Crowder where he brings on ex-vegan Liear Keith onto his podcast in order to debunk some vegan myths. The description of the video literally reads, "This week we sat down with Liear Keith, author of The Vegetarian Myth, to learn about why vegans are wrong." So the intentions of this video are pretty straightforward. Now, before I go on, I want to say that this video is around 6 years old, so I don't know if Steven Crowder still holds these views, but either way, this video appeared in my feed, I watched it, I was a little bit triggered, and then I knew I needed to make this video. Let's get on with it.
Well, I really hate that, and this is kind of where we can find some common ground. I hate this idea that if you eat animals, you hate animals. I mean, we have a dog. He's actually sitting right here. We'll bring up the hopper cam for people watching online who, we adopted a 90-pound, looks like the world's biggest, meanest pit bull who was balding. He had alopecia, broken leg, Lyme disease, because we love it. We're animal lovers.
All right, so the idea from vegans that I think Crowder was trying to criticize is the idea that you can't love animals and eat them too. He says something like, if you eat animals, you hate animals. But generally speaking, you can't love animals and eat them too is the more common phrase and idea that is put forth by vegans. So, yeah, Crowder, it's great that you adopted a pit bull in need. And obviously, who can argue with that being a good thing? But how could you, identify as an animal lover when you do that, while at the same time, multiple times a day, pay for animals to be bred into horrific conditions, exploited, commodified, and killed? What kind of love is that? And let's not forget that this is for taste pleasure because we don't actually need animal products to survive. I surely doubt that Crowder would be convinced that somebody is an animal lover who adopted a pit bull in need, while at the same time paid for another pit bull to be bred into horrific conditions, only to be exploited and murdered for food when there was no genuine need to do so. Of course, it isn't pit bulls that Crowder is eating, but that doesn't matter. Pit bulls are no different from the cows, pigs, and chickens that Crowder eats when it comes to at least having the capacity to suffer and not wanting to be stabbed in the throat for food. People like Crowder who care for the welfare of companion animals only are pet lovers, not animal lovers.
But I don't see it as something that is unnatural or goes against nature or in any way displays hatred because of the way we are designed as human beings.
All right, so Crowder here mentions that he doesn't think that eating animals displays something unnatural or shows something that, is of hatred. Hearing Crowder bring up whether eating animals is natural in a moral discussion just shows how little, at least at the time that this video was shot, Crowder has spent thinking about veganism. Something being natural or not should have no bearing on whether or not that something is moral. Imagine a murderer, when defending themselves in court, saying, "I don't see how me going on a killing spree goes against nature. Lions naturally go on killing sprees, you know what I mean?" It doesn't matter if eating animals is the most natural thing on this planet. Whether or not something is natural doesn't tell you if it's moral. For vegans watching, I used to spend so much time in vegan debates trying to prove that a vegan diet was more natural than a diet comprised of meat. And in hindsight, this was a total waste of time because what is natural is not necessarily what is moral. Once again, Steven also said that he doesn't understand how eating animals displays hatred. So of course one can choose to pay for animals to be murdered while not necessarily hating them. You could not care about them living as opposed to hating them. But for the reasons I stated earlier, deciding to pay for animals to be bred into existence only to be exploited and murdered is in direct conflict with Steven Crowder identifying as an animal lover.
So most of the plant matter on this planet is never going to be food for us.
So this part of the video actually reminds me of when Carnivore MD went on to the Joe Rogan podcast, and Joe Rogan and Paul were talking about how most plant species are not edible.
And one of the things that I say, and as a talking point that I actually stole from you, is that most plants are inedible, but almost all animals are edible. And when you say that to them, they look at you like, oh, shit. Like if you just go out and eat like random plants, you'll get sick as That's real.
Now, it is true that most of the plant kingdom is not edible. According to the FAO, about 4% of all plant species are edible. And there are around 390,900 plants known to science, meaning that around 15,636 plants are actually edible. This in no way proves that a plant-based diet is unhealthy. It just means that there's certain plant foods that you shouldn't eat. I think it's pretty obvious that when a plant-based dietitian is administering a plant-based diet, they're making sure to not advise you to eat the inedible plants. What a concept. So Crowder later mentions that he thinks green smoothies are bad, and instead of consuming them, he consumes raw egg yolks and fermented cod liver oil.
I'm going to avoid that. That's actually what spurred me to look into why I thought maybe the green smoothies were bad, and Rob educated me. And now, it's funny, I do a lot of raw egg yolks, and I do the fermented cod liver oil.
That's
and
good.
Yeah, all
Those
good.
Very good things to eat raw.
So although egg yolks are low in saturated fat, they are extremely high in dietary cholesterol, and we know that the consumption of dietary cholesterol can increase your LDL cholesterol, and we know that there is a causal relationship between increased LDL cholesterol and heart disease. And from this meta-analysis, we can observe that higher intakes of fruits and vegetables is associated with lower risk of all-cause mortality, but particularly cardiovascular mortality. So to be clear, Steven Crowder is depriving himself of a food that can lower his cardiovascular mortality and replacing it with a food filled with dietary cholesterol, which increases his risk of cardiovascular mortality. Amazing. So at a certain point in the video, Lear, Keith, and Crowder start talking about the interdependent nature of, nature. Basically just how, there are mutually beneficial things which occur in nature for different parts of nature.
It's not, us doing something horrible to them or them doing something horrible to us. These are interdependent relationships. And everything in nature is that kind of relationship. That's really my point. I mean, we wouldn't have plants all over the planet if it wasn't for the insects that actually do the pollinating. They work together. The insects get some sugar out of it and the plants get fertilized.
Yeah.
So it works, but it's because they work together. Everybody gets something out of the arrangement. And it's the same thing with domesticated animals and humans. We get something out of it, they get something out of it, and we all live longer.
So I agree that there are interdependent relationships within nature, but the last part where Lear Keith says that within the context of humans domesticating animals, humans get something out of it, and animals get something out of it, and we all live longer, I don't really understand. Of course humans benefit from the domestication of animals for food, but how is an animal being benefited by being victim of exploitation and murder? And let's not forget that the time at which those animals are killed is nowhere near old age. It's more around 1/4 of their natural lifespan. And in the case of chickens, they can be slaughtered around 6 to 8 months old while having a 5 to 10 year lifespan.
And we all live longer.
Would we ever call it beneficial for certain humans who are bred into a miserable existence only to be exploited and killed at 1/4 of their natural lifespan? Obviously not. This whole framing that Lear Keith is trying to put on the domestication of animals as a mutually beneficial transaction or interaction between the humans and animals is just absurd. All right, guys. There's some other points in the video that I want to critique, but I really just am losing patience at this point. There's also a point where they don't really particularly say that plants have feelings, but they're kind of talking about how, plants are alive and, they kind of matter because they're, based in the cycle of nature and therefore there's some value there. So of course, things in nature do have their roles and they have value in that way. But that doesn't mean that we should be giving, rights to dirt or grass or plants just because they play a role. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't really make sense to do this. So this idea that, vegans are kind of hypocritical because they're killing things that are integral to the cycle of nature is just a weird criticism because vegans value well-being, and that's why we place our moral value on animals. So although they didn't technically say that plants have feelings, come on guys, just because an inanimate object or an object that's alive like bacteria or a plant plays a role in nature doesn't mean that we should be giving it the same rights that we want to give to, say, a cow, pig, or chicken, or dog, or cat, or human in reference to being free from being stabbed for food. All right, guys, that is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you enjoy my content and want to support me on Patreon and join the Discord, the link is in my description below. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.
Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid wannabe sense of irony here. Who's your audience? Nobody gets these dumb jokes. Dude, even vegans don't get your weird, stupid